And I'm gonna pop the slideshow in the chat as well, but I'll share my screen as well so that people can be looking at that on the recording as well. Okay. No, should we do introductions? Most people know everybody in here. Actually, maybe I will pause for just a minute. I'm going to pause the recording. All right. So if you were in the objectives for today. So I want to go over the RCWs because if you were in the training yesterday with Heather Mayer and her group, I mentioned this, but I'll mention it again. Tenure at community and technical colleges is founded on law here in Washington State. Other folks in higher education, faculty and other folks in higher education don't get it in law. So if you're a faculty member at, say, WSU, and you get tenure, it's at the will of WSU. There is no Washington State law that I'm aware of. They're not even unionized there. It's all kind of at will. Who gets tenure, when they get tenure, how they get tenure. One of my teachers, I'm a doctoral student at WSU, and I was talking with one of my instructors, Dr. Calderon, who's now over here at WSU Everett, and she's going through tenure, and I was asking her about the process, and it's a mystery to her even how and when she will get tenure. She's going through the tenure process, but it's not even clear to her as to when, in fact, she will actually achieve tenure. So it's quite the mystery. So that's interesting. That's a good point to know that it is protected in our law, which is wonderful. And then we we used that base, that framework in our collective bargaining agreement, our CBA, to construct the language for our ARCs and how we run them. And then the other thing I want to cover is what our responsibilities are as union representatives, as well as what you should be watching for with other committee members. I wanted to talk about the student evaluation process, how to have meaningful conversations during the committee meetings, and then what other ways to support the probationer, and then any other comments or discussions we want to have. So the RCWs are, again, the tenure process is part of the RCWs, like I mentioned. If you're following along online and want to look at those RCWs, I linked them in the PowerPoint presentation. If you're here in person, I also have the slides on the calendar invite, so you can go and look at them again at any time there as well. So you can see both of those and see the actual laws. 8.51 just gives the bulleted definitions of what everything means. And so what you'll see is why we use certain words in the CBA. Sometimes we get those words just straight from the law, and that's why they're there the way they are. 8.52 talks about regulations around maximum probationary period allowed. And so here is where it says it can only be 9 quarters, excluding summer and excluding any approved leaves of absences. So if you do have a leave of absence, that's not counted against you, of course. The other thing the law does allow for, that tenure can be granted early, so it doesn't have to go 9 quarters. In fact, here at Everett Community College, we tend to go only 8 quarters in the actual meetings we hold. Then the college prolongs the probationer that 9th quarter where we don't actually have meetings, and then awards tenure after that 9th quarter. In other words, gives them that probationary bump in pay and takes them to that next step right after the 9th quarter. But Maybe that's something we can push back on since we're not meeting that 9th quarter. Something for us all to think about and rally against. Yeah.
Also wondering, and
I agree, it's so silly.
It is.
we just converted 5 full-time temporary positions over to tenure-track. These people have been doing the job, already have been through an extended, what could be seen as a probationary period.
Yeah.
Is there ever a time where an ARC should push for that to be early?
Yeah.
Especially if, as we continue to talk about creating pathways for long-time associate faculty to make the transition into tenure. If they have a body of work that can be evaluated already, should we be pushing for that as a committee?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Dr. Leaker even implied that in conversations that we've had when we negotiated this voluntary separation incentive. And it came up when we were able to announce this to those individuals that there is this option to grant tenure early, and that perhaps the committees that are forming around these folks would want to do that to people who have been with the college in these positions for a long time. So not all 5 have been here as long. So it depends on who, but certainly B. Rodriguez, Ariana Stafford are 2 that come to mind that have been here greater than 5 years in that position. So yes, that's something that we should be aware of, right? And consider pushing recommendations forward to the board to award tenure early in cases possibly like that, especially if we can rally these committee, these probationers to provide ample support that shows, hey, here's all my evaluations from the last 5 years or for however long it is, right? So we can help these probationers really beef up their support of this sort of thing. So yes, let's keep thinking about that. So tenure ultimately does have to be granted by the Board of Trustees. So that is in law. So even if we storm the board meetings and push and send these letters of recommendations, it does ultimately lie within the board. I have been denied tenure though, and I can tell you that I fought a grievance to still be awarded tenure. So even if there is a situation where it's looking like something unjust has happened, of course, we the union will fight to make sure that that gets rectified. Anusha, I see your hand up.
Yes, so if everything is in order, why is there a reason why the Board of Trustees would deny?
We can ask. They don't have to tell us.
Oh,
Sometimes we don't know.
okay.
They don't like to have mud on their face, so sometimes they don't like to say so in public. Why?
Okay.
There was a big stink made at the meeting where I was denied tenure, I can tell you publicly, and they just ignored the audience and said nothing publicly.
It is sort of the board way.
Yeah, it is the board way to ignore the public, but unfortunately, yeah, I wish I could tell you differently. Although they do respond to pressure. I mean, I don't want anybody to get dissuaded from attending board meetings. The board themselves are their job. They are appointed by the governor, Jay Inslee, currently. Who knows who the next person will be? But their job is to approve the budget for the college, hire and fire the president. And that is their job, to oversee the fiscal responsibility of this college and to ensure that the president is running this college effectively. And so we have that power to go to these board meetings and even attend, listen in as much as possible, or attend in person and put pressure on them. The more that they see that we are interested in what they're doing, the more they're apt to doing a better job and not just doing whatever the president says, right? So I encourage all of you to listen, at least at the very minimum, listen in when the board meetings happen. They happen usually the 3rd Tuesday of every month. This November, it was moved to the last Thursday because of Thanksgiving, but normally it's the 3rd Thursday of every month. So listen in, give input, give feedback, come support when you can. But getting back to this, review process. So, the other thing to know is that the probationary period can be extended beyond 9 quarters so long as there is an improvement plan in place. So it's important that if you have a probationer that is showing some signs that maybe they are going to need an extra quarter because of whatever's going on, it's important to make sure that there is an improvement plan in place to document that this probationer might need additional time. And it's not just around teaching. If it's an instructional faculty, it could be other things that they have on their plate that they're just need additional time to make sure that they are ready to fulfill all the requirements of a tenured faculty member. Yeah, Andy.
Nina, from the arts or from the AFT's perspective, yesterday's training, Eugene had brought up that don't be afraid of improvement plans, that they're a positive tool to be utilized. Had I gotten an improvement plan when I was on my tenure committee, I would have been mortified. I mean, I was terrified by that.
Yeah, me too.
Kind of where is the union's thought on the use of improvement plans? Is it just one tool in the toolbox to be used like we would give feedback to somebody, or is it a more serious matter?
Well, I appreciate Eugene trying to make people feel better about it, but it is a pretty serious tool. Like, we're only going to that tool if there is a concern where we are feeling like, as a committee, that there is cause for pause. In fact, there may be pause in that the committee may be feeling like we're not sure if we want to award tenure, or we may want to extend this tenure process, honestly. We should not be just loosely using improvement plans for just minor things that can be just, as teachers, we all have bumps in the road and things we certainly can improve on. To me, I don't know if anybody else has any other feelings about that, but yesterday, if you weren't there, Eugene McAvoy mentioned that improvement plans are supposed to be looked at as a bad thing, that they can be a very good thing. Okay, well, thank you for trying to make people feel better, but honestly, they're there because there is a bit of a concern. We don't want to get rid of somebody per se, but we do want them to do well at the college. And so we're saying, hey, let's rectify this. And so in the sense that it's not the end of the world, he's correct. We for sure want to right the ship and guide this person in a way that is going to be good for the probationer and for the college. So for sure. Oh, there's something in the chat. Candace, I agree with Nina, and it didn't quite sit right with me in the ARC training. Yeah, it's a tricky. It's not something to be used lightly.
In most tenure or most non-tenure jobs, most other, like in the newspaper field I come from, if you have an improvement plan, it's a warning that, hey, your job is potentially at risk.
Yes.
There's room for growth. There's room to get back on track.
Correct.
That was a very different use of improvement plans at yesterday's suggestion on how to use improvement plans.
Yes, and I would say that's how I would hope they were be used here. That again, we don't want to scare the probationer per se. However, we do want them alert them that, hey, things are not. We do need to rectify a situation, whatever they may be, and help them get back on track. Yeah, for sure. So there's that. Okay, so here comes our first scenario. So if you are online, I'm going to want you to pop on to the link that is there, and I'm going to get you guys into groups. So here's the example. So before I get you guys into groups, here's the example. So you have an instructional probationer, so not counseling, not entry advising, not library, instructional. They're in their second quarter of the ARC process. So first year, second quarter. You've had 2 meetings, including the meeting with the president. So that's already happened. You've had 1 classroom observation. And the administrator has already written up their administrator evaluation on this person. The probationer during week 5 of the quarter goes out on an approved leave of absence and does not return until week 4 of the following quarter. Upon returning to work, the probationer is given 100% release time for their work on creations of new courses of 2 new programs that are going to be added to the college this coming year. Which makes sense, right? If he's coming in week 4, unless there's a late start class that he can be given or she can be given. That makes sense. They also continue with their advising training, assist with entry advising for their program. So they're clearly completing faculty work minus teaching. You are the union representative. The administrator, the chair of the ARC, and the VP of instruction are directing the rest of the ARC not to meet this quarter and not to count either quarter as part of their 9 quarters. What should you do, and what are appropriate probable solutions for this person? Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. Now, hopefully you guys have the link to the slide so that you can refer back to it. I'm gonna pause the recording. Somebody remind me to resume recording when we come back. Otherwise I'll forget. So let's hear a share out. What'd you guys talk about? Let's start, maybe somebody on Zoom world. What's something that came up in your group? Anybody's group? Any solid plans?
Well, we thought that, we're from group 1. This is Amber. We thought that both quarters should be counted. The probationer missed just part of each quarter. We're not observing them every day and every moment of their working life. They had significant observations and work done in the first quarter, and then were doing significant work when they came back. So we thought that we would present that to the committee, and then if we had pushback, would reach out to our union rep.
Nice. Oh, both quarters counted. Okay. Anyone else have another idea? How about the other group? What did the other group come up with?
And then Christina can jump in too. I know she'd taken the notes for our group, but we had some clarifying questions as far as what, because it says that minus the teaching, not everyone's teaching schedule is the same. They might start later in the quarter, or does it have to be, what defines that? We weren't sure why the first quarter should definitely count, and then we weren't sure what the second, as far as meeting. They seem like they're still meeting their obligations. They're also doing things that are kind of above and beyond when you're creating new courses for the college, so that has value, and not all probationers do that, and that's kind of going above and beyond as part of their portfolio. As far as could still, their meeting other obligations, advising and all that. So as far as meetings, they could still meet by Zoom. There were some other things too. I know from my group wanted to chime in.
That came up in ours too, by the way. If anybody else wants to pipe in online, feel free. That came up for us too, is if the probationer second quarter is not teaching, are there any other activities that they're doing that could be observed to at least get the committee an observation for the second quarter? And I wondered if they could observe an advising session with the student, with a student. Or what else? I mean, what else could they do?
would they be able to observe one of the classes that they are creating?
Yeah, maybe, or at least have a conversation with them. Like, to me, the faculty member is for sure doing work, right? And if the faculty member if the committee thinks both quarters should count, then as a union rep, I'm going to help fight for them to get both quarters to count for sure. It sounds like we've got pushback from the administration, so there's going to be a little bit of work that we as a union got to do to push for it, but we will for sure push for that person. But we've got for sure, was it 4 weeks? I don't have the slide up in front of me right now, but 4 weeks plus 5, we've got almost a full quarter's worth. It certainly should at least count for 1 quarter, I would assume. And there are other ways that we can observe probationers that are not just in a classroom, even if it's an instructional faculty member. So, or we can evaluate them, right? So it's not just about observations. It's like, what else can we do to help support this person? We could write up a descriptor about talking to them about what they're doing. Like, so second quarter, they need to be going to the starfish training, right? To learn about their advisees, because in quarter 3, they're going to be getting 10 advisees. So we could have that conversation with them and ask and help them brainstorm on how to better serve their students. And we could write that up as supportive documentation for their portfolio. So I feel like we could still do more for the faculty. I think a lot of times, especially in instructional faculty, we get consumed with student evaluations, classroom teaching, and we ignore all of our duties outside the classroom a little bit too much with the probationers. Would you guys agree? At least I do. I'll speak for myself. I for sure do. I don't spend enough time with the probationers talking about those duties outside the classroom, except to sometimes grill them in their committee. Well, are you doing committees? When are you doing committees? What committees are you doing? Right? I mean, and that's not very supportive.
Advising and service to the college take more time than instruction on this campus.
Yeah, for sure.
Particularly advising, and that's where the one-on-one magic happens with so many students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nina, the checklist is very specific with the pieces that we need, and I think that could be part of that fixation as well.
Yes,
We got to check boxes.
Agreed.
If we're not going to be able to perfectly check that box in a given quarter, what is the process? Do we need to alert the union? Can the committee make a decision? Do we have to contact Lynn Deacon because she's the person that was listed yesterday in the training in charge of the process?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I don't know. Christina, were you at that meeting? Yeah, Lynn apparently is in charge. No, that's a great question, Andy. Yeah, it's true. As when I have been chair of a committee, live and die by the checkbox, right? Because we want to make sure everything looks good in the portfolio. All the boxes are checked. Is everything published correctly? So yeah, it can get a little scary because we want to make sure our probationer is shining, right? But can we tweak it? So instead of it saying classroom observation, can we just edit the name to be observations for that quarter? To me, yes. As long as we're providing input, and as long as you get buy-in from the rest of your committee, if your committee's on board saying, look, we're going to modify this title on the Canvas portfolio to say observations for this quarter so that we are being truthful. And we're going to provide documentation as to why we're modifying this title so that we are supportive of this teacher and they are still doing instruction. It's just not formal in front of a classroom. It's happening in these other ways. I think that's still perfectly acceptable in my opinion, right? I mean, we want these faculty members to grow and understand that life as a tenured faculty is much more beyond the classroom, right? I mean, that's what I hear. When I hear complaints about other faculty members, what do I hear? I bet you all can tell me, right? It's so-and-so doesn't go to committee. So-and-so doesn't see students. So-and-so doesn't, it's the work outside the classroom, right? And well, what are we doing to support these guys and gals outside the classroom, right? So for sure, let's fix these check boxes and make it more meaningful to support work outside the classrooms, but let's be professionals and be okay with pushing our committee to modify titles. We are all professionals, and if you're worried, let's get union support. Christina and I will take it to the administration and get you the authorization to say, yes, even administration is cool with it, so that everybody's, I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and it'll be okay. It really will.
How much input do you want? I'm gonna try to figure out how to phrase this. How in the loop should we keep you when there is potential problem? We don't want to put you and Christina in the position to be de facto committee members, but if, if we're changing the title of observations, do you want a quick email so you're aware of what we're doing?
Yeah, if you go into Article 8, especially if you're a chair or a union rep, you will see in one of the, I think it's 8.7, don't quote me on that. But there is a spot there that says, the college shall provide updates to the union president of activities for each quarter from the committee. Now, I haven't been asking for those, but I do have the right to ask for those. So don't feel like you are burdening me or breaking the confidentiality of the tenure committee. That's what I'm here for. If there has to be a deviation in a plan because something has happened, like a leave of absence or something has happened, yes, that's what I'm here for, because we do want to be aware of potential issues that are arising. That's why that phrase is there in the contract, so that in case there is a potential for grievance, that we are made aware of it ahead of time, then can nip it in the bud. Yeah, for sure.
It might be helpful, not that I want to add extra work to anybody's plate or mine, but it might be helpful that maybe at year end or at quarter end to have like a quick little Google form for all of the admin for unions to go into, just a quick little 4 or 5 sentence progress update.
Yeah, or at least for the chairs of the committees to give me a progress update or something.
I was thinking even from the union perspective.
Oh yeah, for the union reps to do it for me.
And
Yeah, that would be
send
fantastic.
it directly to you, to the union, and then that way you just have record
I like that.
of just what's going on.
Yeah, or even just, I could email you all and say, hey, is there anything I should be aware of? Or is everything going fantastic? You could even email me back saying, nope, things are great. Thanks for checking. Yeah, it doesn't even have to be anything formal, or
That's true.
yeah, can we have coffee? And I'll say, sure, let's go have coffee. I'll pay, union will buy.
On the committee checklist itself, the title there says peer or committee observation, doesn't say class on the checklist.
Ah, see, there you go. The checklist even says peer or committee observation. It doesn't say classroom. Ta-da-da. Somebody was thinking. Thank you, Joe. Any other comments from Zoom land? Okay, hopefully you all aren't asleep. See, if I were teaching a live stream class, I would be saying, is everybody alive out there?
Adding this 2 quarters together, at least we should get 1 quarter counted.
Yeah, and I use the scenario, but both the scenarios that you see, we have example 1 and example 2, because these actually came about, and not verbatim like this, but very similar to this. And we as a union were told that both quarters weren't going to count, and I pushed back, and I was able to get one of the quarters to count. And at first they weren't going to count either quarters, and I was like, wait a minute. So it is important for us, especially if you are sitting in the union representative, to not just agree with the chair of the committee, not just to agree with the division rep, not to just agree with the administrator on the committee. If something in the hairs on the back of your neck, or just something is not sitting right in your stomach, say something. If you're nervous to say something, come to me, come to a rep. But please say something. Don't let it go by is the point. Because we want to make sure, because if it's not sitting well with you, it's probably not sitting well with the probationer. And guess what? They're not going to say anything because they're nervous.
Hey,
right?
Nina, I'm sorry if I missed this. I had to take a call, but just to make sure we're clear. So when we have union reps on an ARC and they're in this type of situation, would you
Yes.
recommend that they be reaching directly out to administration, or that they be reaching out to executive council and we'll take it from there?
I recommend they reach out to their committee first during meetings. And if they still
Okay.
don't feel like they're being heard, or they just don't feel like it was resolved to their satisfaction, absolutely reach out to us. Steve Horn is
Okay.
the current VP of grievances, or me, or Christina, one of us, any of us, in especially in the tenure ranks, because we've all been through the tenure process, for sure would union reps would know how to handle it, or could bring it forward. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I've asked this within our small group at the breakout, and again, one of the challenges that we face is finding the balance between the evaluative component of what we're doing and defending and supporting our probationer. And I think that the person in the AFT position has an extra burden. To what degree, if we're in a scenario where we have serious concerns with the probationer about the probationer's performance or lack thereof, if we think that we share the administration's concerns,
Yes.
but by the letter of the law of the contract,
Yeah.
we should be protecting our probationers' rights. Where do we
Good
come down
point.
on this?
That's a great point, Andy. So we do have faculty who, for whatever reason, just are not a good fit as a tenured member of our campus, right? We depending on how long you've been here, I can think of at least 2 people who have been on this campus who I am glad are no longer at this campus, right? Because for whatever reasons, I'm not going to get into it today, I am glad that they are no longer here. And, as long, here's the deal. If you do have a probationer who turns out to, for whatever reason, not be somebody who is somebody we want to be a tenured faculty member, please just follow the contract, right? Do the needs for improvement plan. And if they're not following it, then we vote no on tenure, right? So as long as we are following the contract and following the procedures, we're good, right? We don't want anybody who is going to be here at the college who's not going to be a dedicated tenured faculty member who meets the values that we see as important here at this college, right? So it's important for us not to just skirt somebody along through the process, because then they become those faculty that we all tend to resent, right? Because the people who are here at this training are people who are not the slackers, right? We are the ones that are like, gosh, how did so-and-so get tenure, right? So we know these people. So the union is in favor of y'all. Just make sure you're following the contract, ask questions. Did you do the needs for improvement plan? Did the faculty member get ample support and help and guidance? And are they still just not unable to do what they need to do? Okay, well, I recommend you to, vote no on recommending for tenure. Right? I mean, so yeah, as long as you follow the process, you are fine. One of the RCWs that I appreciated in Heather's slideshow yesterday was an RCW that referred to peer reviews. And so here's the other thing. If you witness if you have an observation that is troublesome to you, make sure you are documenting it. Nobody likes to have to write those up, but you should as documentation. There's an RCW that says you will not be held liable, so they cannot file a civil suit against you. That was in Heather's slideshow yesterday, and I have that RCW written down if anybody wants it. So, all right, let's move forward, and we will take a break, just like a 5-minute bathroom break in a few minutes here. But I do want to move on here, talk about a couple more things. Okay, another RCW talks about the progress report. So a couple of the documents that we have in the collective bargaining agreement that are on that checklist are also part of law, but not all of them. But one is the progress report. So that quarterly progress report that the chairs have to write up is part of law. So no matter what if we do get rid of some forms, The progress report is one we cannot get rid of. The reflection one, I hear grumbles about, and I agree, especially year one. It's stupid, right? Because you're getting rid of it second. They're having to write it second quarter. That seems lame to me. I'd love to see that reflection go away, especially first quarter, or when they have to write it second quarter. It seems stupid. I'm all for getting rid of the reflection in year one. At any rate, so that one, the progress report has to say, and of course the annual recommendation to the board. So those two are in law and must stay. And then this portion of the law also describes how the ARC recommends. So if you've ever been to a board of trustees meeting, if you listen to how they phrase the awarding of tenure and you look at this RCW, you'll know exactly why they say it the way they do, because they just yanked it straight from the law. Okay. The other thing in law is actually how the committee is made up, and it says very clearly that there has to be a member, one student, there has to be an administrator, and that the faculty must make up the majority of the committee. And so that's why we always have 3 and not just 2 faculty members on the committee. We could have 4 or 5, but we've got at least a minimum majority on the committee.
And for each meeting, is that true for each meeting as well?
Yeah, so that came up in the training yesterday too, because somebody said, well, what if a faculty member is missing from a meeting? Should the meeting still take place? And my response, somebody asked, well, Nina's here, we should let her answer that. And my response was, to me, it all depends on the topic of the meeting, what's taking place, especially if it's a faculty member. If it's a student or an administrator, I would say if it's a one-off, still have the meeting. If it's a faculty member, I would assess what is the purpose of the meeting. Is it just like a first meeting or a third meeting where it's not, I mean, what's being talked about? Are you evaluating something? Are you talking about something? Can the faculty member that's missing provide input in another way so that their voice is heard at the meeting, even though they're not there? So I would just have that conversation as a committee to see, is there a way that the faculty member's voice can still be heard? And, what's the topic? Who's going to be there? Is it the meeting with the president?
Should we always have at least 2 faculty members?
At least 2, yeah. I would not have it be so that the administrator and student and only one faculty is there. That's a little lopsided and okay. So yeah, but if the one person's missing, can the voice still be recognized in some way? And have that conversation for sure. This is something I mentioned yesterday, and if you weren't at the training yesterday or will be going next week, you'll hear me repeat this before. We caught 2 errors. One we caught last year, and another one I caught just this quarter. And that's in the documents and in the CBA. And in fact, these errors are still in the CBA that's linked on the website. But check your Canvas portfolios. So the first error is in the checklist. So the checklist, which I see Joe's got up on his pad there on his device, on the checklist, it refers to the administrator evaluations, and it refers you to G2 and G3, I believe. And if you were to go to the CBA online right now and look at what G2 and G3 is, you would see it says administrative classroom observation, and that is incorrect. That is incorrect. So if in your documents you see administrative classroom observation, it is incorrect. Be sure, and all the deans have been told this, but I just wanted to triple check that all y'all have the right forms. It should be a template that just talks about what the faculty is doing outside the classroom, actually. So it's a blank template form that the administrator fills out that it's kind of like what the deans are supposed to be doing with us in the fall. It's similar to that, where they're describing what they're doing on committees and community work, and if they have any release time or whatever. It's one of those forms. So just double check that. They should not be doing classroom observation as their administrative evaluation. And then, the other, error I just saw this quarter because the probationer on our, that I am on is in his second quarter, is that the recommendation for tenure should not have the president's signature line. They are not a member of the committee and are not recommending, to award tenure or to continue the probationary period in any way. That they're there to sit and observe the meeting, but they are not there to sign the document to recommend tenure to the board. That wasn't the agreement in the CBA. It was there, they were there to listen in, to be aware of the process, to then provide input to the board if they had questions, but they were not there to sign that document. So make sure to, if you've got that, just delete. I think it's a Word document. But make sure that this
Question
president
about
isn't
that.
signing. Yeah.
If that is the case, where the president, we don't necessarily need the president's authority to.
Yeah.
Then why is there so much pressure around that meeting? I mean, I know it's important to meet the president, right? But there is so much like, I mean, every art committee goes into a frenzy trying to make appointments, you know what I'm saying, with the president. Now, I'm just imagining being the president, being in their shoes going, I don't even need to, they don't need me.
Right.
Right? Why is everybody struggling to get this meeting?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what I'm saying? It seems kind of like there's this huge pressure about meeting the president, and I can understand from a probationer and whatnot, we want to show off the probationer and whatnot. But yet, I guess I was under the assumption that they needed president authority.
Yeah, okay. So the history behind why the president meeting came about, actually, you can blame me for that, honestly, Nina Benedetti. It's my fault. No, seriously, it is my fault. So when I was hired as a tenure-track faculty member, it was under Charlie Earl. For those who have been around that long would know that name. He went on to become the head of state board for a while. And then David Byer came on, right? And David Byer was the one to, when David Byer came on was the year that I was denied tenure. And we came up with a new CBA because I agreed to that. And it was under David's authority that I was authorized to have another year of tenure. And then I was awarded tenure in my fourth year through the tenure process. And when the CBA was renegotiated, the addition of the president being in the meeting before the board decides tenure was added. And it was added because the board felt blindsided when there was such an uproar when I was denied tenure. And they said that they wanted the president to be alerted ahead of time in case there were a needs for improvement plan talked about. So the board wanted the president in at least one meeting to hear if there's any grumblings going on. Is the committee happy with this probationer? So that the president could then tell the board, hey, pay close attention to this probationer, look more closely at these forms, so that when you go in to decide, you will be more critical in your eye.
Presidential meeting is Q2 though, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's way too early in the process. We're just getting to know.
Well, it's not just Q2, it's every year, just before the board decides. And so it's that chance for the president to then be that second voice in the executive session when they are reviewing the candidates to say, well, here's what I saw when they were in the meeting.
I would say that first one is a little like you just got on campus and now you're meeting with the president.
Yeah. Honest, they're just there to observe. That's all they're there for, to get to know the probationer and to get a glimpse of who this person is, because the board might ask the president for feedback.
The fifth or sixth time we've met the probationer at that point in the process.
Yeah.
So I was to learn the names of the people on my
It seems to me the BPI would be better fit for that position.
Probably. And we can look at that in our next CBA to see, do we want to change that language?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's still fairly new in the history of our CBAs on this campus to have the president in there,
Is the
but
goal of the meeting with the president? The president's more observing the meeting?
Yes.
Or not participating?
they can choose to ask questions just to get to know the probationer better and to understand how the committee is working with the probationer. I mean, the goal is so that the president has an idea truly to see
Yeah.
are things going well with this person? Should the board of trustees have cause for concern on awarding tenure? Like, that's their goal, is to be kind of a little fly on the wall, or to actually be a little bit more engaged and ask some questions.
And there is some value to the probationer. When in my meetings with Dr. Byer, I was able to deliver to him like 3 talking points, what the journalism program is all about here. And anytime you would hear him talk about journalism at a meeting, those 3 talking points would come out. But that would, I mean, I only had 5 or 6 one-on-one audiences with him the entire time that we worked
I
together.
just wonder if maybe it might be better to just say, oh, during the course of tenure process, they need to meet with the president twice.
Yeah,
Just
maybe.
say everybody has to do it on this quarter.
Yeah,
this
maybe
time.
maybe
It's
year 2 and year
so
3
boundary.
instead of year 1, because year 1 is
Yeah.
pretty premature.
Exactly, because
Sometimes.
that would be my.
I don't know. Sometimes concerns can arise
They
pretty
can.
quickly though,
That's
too.
true.
I don't know. It's hard to say. All right, let's take a quick 5-minute,
Can I ask a question, Nina?
bathroom break. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and since you find those arrows, in the checklist and also the forms, are we going to have a corrected one?
So the Heather Mayer said that all of the forms in Canvas on the original documents are corrected. If in your Canvas file, if you have a probationer that's newer than a year, you might ask Heather Mayer for a copy of the new form. She has them.
Thank you.
Good question. All right, let's take 5 minutes for bathroom breaks. All right. So as union reps related to the probationary process, the articles I really want to ensure that you are paying attention to primarily are Articles 8, that's the tenure process, Article 14, which is the faculty responsibilities, and now Appendix H. It used to be, I think it was D, but they've moved down in the appendices to H. And so that's the entire tenure process. It's called tenure process and operating procedure. That's where all of the documents that nowadays you can find on Canvas, but now you should be able to find also in the CBA. So representation responsibility. So who is who? We heard yesterday during Heather Mayer's spiel, and if you didn't go yesterday, you're going to hear next week, and David's going to be the one overseeing that because Heather's now moving into Eugene's old position. But we heard what they believed is the responsibilities, and here's now the union's perspective on these. So we have the student who's an equal member. Just know that that student is paid by Student Life. Eugene mentioned that this student has a work email and a student email. I thought that was good to know. I didn't know that yesterday. Andy had asked that question, and I thought that was super important to know. So if you're having trouble locating your student, email them not only at their student email account, but their work email account. They are required to, as Student Life employees, be checking their work email regularly. So I thought that was interesting, but they are also equal members. So make sure you're including them in conversations and meetings and all of that sort of thing. The administrator, also an equal member. So don't let the administrator direct the ARC committee. Please don't ever let the administrator be the chair on an ARC committee. We want this committee to truly be led by the faculty. I want the entire process to be led by faculty. Yes.
Quick question on the student. Is there any concerns that do all of the students come from Student Life? And if so, is there any concern with that? Because that's a very specific subset of student that's engaged in different ways.
Yeah. The law, the only thing around the law, the parameters say that they must be a full-time student and that they are appointed by the student body in some way. So there are parameters in the law. The way that this college has decided to do that is with that area. They don't have to pick them straight from it basically, what I gather from the law, it says that they have to be, I can't remember if it says appointed or voted on by the student body. So to me, they can be from any area. They have chosen to do it from like the ambassadors and other, I don't know why they do what they do. Maybe now that Eugene's there, you could probably bend his ear and get maybe some changes there, because it's true. They are a very select group of students. It might be nice to have some alternative, older working students, evening students, maybe even, I don't know. It depends on the committee, especially if we're doing like a tenure track for a vocational program or something. There's some nursing students on there though, which I totally love. There's a nursing student on my tenure committee and she's dedicated and amazing. So I don't know. I feel like they're fairly diverse.
Yeah, no,
I don't know.
I
Anyway.
don't have a problem with the students. I was just curious where they were.
Yeah. We just kind of let Jennifer Rhodes and her team take care of those. The chair, let's talk about the chair for a little bit here. So I honestly would consider rotating the chair, please. I know there are committees out there who are like, no, I'll just do it. And then they keep the same person for all 3 years. But honestly, it's just, it's better if, for balance purposes, to keep the chair, rotating. I know we're all very busy. Nobody likes to be chair because it's the heaviest lift, I believe, out of all the positions, because you're in charge of all the forms, calling the meetings, all of that sort of thing. But please consider encouraging rotating that. But if the committee does decide that you all are going to have the same person be the chair the entire year, please consider at least not having that person be in the division that the probationer resides in. Why would Nina be saying that? Any ideas? Why might that be a difficult position for the probationer? I'm gonna be pulling teeth with my students.
Yeah, Nina, are you just worried that people will, that if there are issues in the division, they're going to be in the ARC, they're going to be less comfortable talking to that person because they have to work with them more closely?
Yeah, I mean, as I put in there, like, let's remember positionality. Like, if you're a probationer and your chair is also in your division, especially even if your chair is also actually your department head, I mean, that even makes it even more difficult, right? You're not going to want to say anything that's going to mess up this process of you getting tenure, right? So even if you guys have the best relationship possible, there's still that positionality there, right? So you can have what you believe to be the best relationship possible, but there's still that power imbalance there, no matter how equal we try to make these things. So if the chair of the ARC committee is within the division and is in that position for all 3 years, that power structure is still there, no matter how equal we try to make it be, right? So that's where it just gets a little tricky, and it helps the probationer be on a little more of equal footing if that chair, if it's again going to be the same person for all 3 years, is not in the division, because there's just that one step of objectiveness removed, in my opinion. I mean, you guys do you, but I'm just trying to see it in a way that kind of makes the footing a little bit in more of an equal balance for the probationer. That's my 2 cents as far as that goes. It's just, I want to ensure that the probationer has a sense of safety and security and feeling of equalness in the committee itself, for sure. And then union representative, of course, you are also an equal member there. But your job really is to ensure that the law and the contract are being followed and to be that voice for the probationer when there is concern that the process, procedures, or other issues are not being followed, that the probationer may feel uncomfortable addressing themselves. Again, they're not going to want to necessarily say anything because this is their chance for full-time employment, permanent employment, right? So even if they may be feeling uneasy, chances are they're not going to say anything. So you've got to be that voice for them. So please remember that. 8.60 in the CBA talks about the meeting itself. So please remember that the minimum number of meetings are 3. The CBA says that 1 must be without the probationer and 2 with. But if you guys want to meet more than 3, you can. There's nothing in the CBA that says you can't meet more than the minimum.
Is there a suggested length for these meetings?
No, in fact, the status quo on this campus has always been for the meeting with and without is a half hour for each, right? Just because people are so time crunched. But because we're only doing 2 half-hour meetings, and then usually that first or third meeting is either an hour long or 30 minutes long, depending on the committee. Because that's such a short time with your probationer, bullet point 3 here, consider having more informal meetings with your person to connect with them, get to know them, or set up times outside just to strategize with them, to brainstorm with them, to talk with them. So even outside classroom observations or other types of formal observations, to just get to know each other a little bit more, build that connection, right? As Andrew was saying a little while ago, it's important to have that connection on campus with somebody, with the college. Which brings us to the evaluation process, right? So I just put in 8.7's evaluation. This is just language straight from the CBA in here about the evaluation. And I want to point out one thing here, because then we're going to get to our example, our next sample. So 8.7, letter B, number 1, is going to be in our next sample here. So B says, evaluation shall be based partly on firsthand observation of the probationer's performance in the position by the following individuals. And number 1 says, the probationer's discipline peer group. A discipline peer is a tenured faculty in the same academic discipline as the probationer. If there is not a tenured faculty in the same academic discipline, an alternate will be found. And then it says the other evaluations will be probationers, the students, the immediate supervisor, and then of course a self-evaluation. Now up in B again, it says partly on firsthand observation. So if you are on a committee that, like Sharon, who was in here, she's on a counseling committee, or somebody, there's 2 of you in Zoom who are also, I think, serving on a counselor committee. So it's not that the CBA doesn't allow you to observe in those areas, but it does say that number 1 does say that you will get some observations in part from a probationer's discipline. So that's important to remember as well. Think about who is on your committee, and are there people on that committee who are in that discipline? And if not, y'all need to be having a conversation in the committee about how do you get there? So this brings us to the next sample, in which we're going to go back into small groups and talk about. So, example, you're on an arc, Your committee is comprised of faculty who do not meet the qualifications in 8.70B1. The college does not have a tenured faculty member within the same academic discipline. The administrator on the ARC states that they used to teach in that field and suggests that perhaps they could do the classroom observation and meet the requirement. What do you do? What are the probable appropriate solutions? Okay, so gonna get back into some breakout rooms. I'm gonna pause the recording. Okay, how'd you guys do? Now this example is actually occurring on 2 committees right now, at least 2 right now. And in fact, the example that I give up there is on my committee right now. My dean said, oh, you know, I'm a linguist. I can do the observation. You know, I love you, Katie, but you're not a tenured faculty member, so no. So, what did the groups come up with? Let's hear. Somebody unmute and hear what y'all came up with.
Well, I can go. I was in group 2. One, absolutely not. The administrator can't do the observation because that's clear in the collective bargaining agreement and RCW. The other one that does happen, but any ARC that I've been on, there's only one person that's from that same division. So you have an ARC where they're not from that same or discipline. It's when we go and observe, like if I'm observing, I don't, that discipline, I don't know that, but I do know how to teach. And that's what we're really observing is how they are teaching, how they're managing the classroom, you know, their student evals, this student who goes and observes, they're really from that unique perspective about what they've seen as effective instruction and when they're observing that. So is it necessarily a problem if you don't have someone from the exact same discipline on the art committee? Because when we're observing their how they teach. We can assume, you know, we never want to make
not what they
we can
teach.
assume that they have the credentials, they have the appropriate educational level, or they wouldn't have been hired in the first place for the tenure track. So they have that knowledge. And just because you're an expert in your field and you have that knowledge base doesn't necessarily mean that it always translates to teaching. So we're really looking at it from perspective as how they're teaching, how they're managing the classroom and growing in that aspect. 'Cause I know when I started on tenure track, I'd been a nurse for 10 years and I was at my, you know, expert level, you know, as a nurse and had a lot of varied experience with that. But I definitely had work and growth as an instructor because I had never taught in the classroom before. And I had people on my ARC who would come and observe me, one from biology, another person from English, and they really helped to inform my teaching because they had a lot of experience with that. So from our group, it was that it's not necessarily a problem because whomever's observing you is really looking at how you're teaching and how you're managing the classroom and all of that.
How about the other group? Amber or Nusha or Pratyusha or Tracy?
I'll do it again. We actually mentioned that something similar is happening on mine, but not necessarily the same. And it's just that my probationer is a counselor. And so there's some limitations as to who can be in and observing. And so we found that we are lucky enough to have another counselor on the committee who can do those peer evaluations, but that also Carrie's also leading some sessions, some group sessions and things like that. And so those ones are more appropriate for us to sit on. But for this specific scenario, we sort of thought, the administrator is not an appropriate solution. It's not fair to the probationer. It's very different having a peer in your classroom versus an administrator. And it's hard for that administrator to take that administrator hat off and be just a peer. So we defaulted to ask Nina and also to present maybe, someone else from the department and there's some one of Tracy in our group is from cosmetology, and she, pointed out that if it's not her, there's not any other tenured faculty. If other people, there's not very many options is all. And so we would have to kind of be creative with that.
If the other other tenured faculty left, there's no other option besides me to be on like a subject matter person.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And we have a person in tenure track right now, Ernest Sanders, who's in criminal justice. And we don't have another tenured faculty member in criminal justice. And so what does that tenure committee do? And that is a very niche field, and the concern that came up in our group is, well, could you ask an adjunct faculty member to do it? And my first gut reaction to that is, well, sure, but how many of those adjuncts applied for that position? And so are you asking somebody to do a classroom observation on a job that they kind of wanted or possibly applied for? And how objective is that classroom observation going to be? That's my concern. I get what you said, Candace, about that we're all instructors and understand the importance and pedagogy around teaching in general, but the reasoning for the language in there, and it says partially, so it doesn't necessarily matter to the union if there isn't a discipline expert on the tenure committee, because yeah, you're right, we are all teachers, but when it comes to an observation, occasionally or partially, as the language says in there, it would be good to have a content expert, somebody who is an expert, do an observation, I would say at least once a year. So for instance, if you had a nursing tenure committee and nobody else was a nurse on that committee, having at least one faculty in the nursing department come and do an observation once a year, I'm guessing the nurses would want that at least once a year. Especially because only nurses may know certain procedural stuff that should be taught, and ensuring that sort of stuff within your own discipline is being taught that somebody outside of that discipline doesn't know, if that makes sense. So there are things within the discipline that only somebody who is an expert in that discipline would know. And so having an observation from somebody in that discipline really should be part of this evaluative process, even though we know they're experts and whatnot. It's always good to have another set of eyes to ensure that that's happening, at least partially again. So nobody is saying that they should have those observations quarterly, or that person has to be on the tenure committee themselves. It's just that we wanted to ensure that that expert was weighing in at least once a year, I would say. Yeah, Andrew.
I just want to let you know, with the screen, Christine has a question.
Okay, thank you. Christine, go right ahead.
So my question is, could you have someone from your advisory committee do the observation who maybe doesn't?
Oh, that might work.
How, I mean, I just wonder if that's a possibility.
Maybe, Christine. Joe, what did you say? You had mentioned maybe an adjunct and make sure they get paid. I like the idea of maybe, I'm sure criminal justice has to have an advisory board. I'm guessing they have to because of
I think that's right.
They do. I remember working in Liberty Hall when they'd have advisory meetings and there'd be all these people around with their handguns on them. We would freak out a little bit. So yeah, they do.
Yeah, because they I'm sure now. Yeah, and are there members of those who have taught before? And yeah, so that might be an option. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Would we need to get permission from someone to do that? I mean, what?
Yeah, I mean that ultimately. I recommended to Andrew that he talk to his committee about it and see if they can brainstorm ideas. I wondered if John Stewart, the previous faculty member, could.
I'm thinking FERPA is what I'm thinking with regard to like an advisory committee member, if that's a violation.
Yeah, we would have to get student permission and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
run into potentially with the previous instructor, though, if the new instructor is teaching something differently or taking the program in a different direction, there could be positionality issues with that. as
Could
well.
be, yeah. So definitely a conversation to have. I don't think it's an urgent conversation. He's starting his first quarter now and there's time, but certainly a conversation to have. And I just wanted to get that section of the CBA in front of you guys so that you're thinking about it. Maybe not for the current committee that you're on, but in future committees for sure. So thanks for that. Hopefully. Oh, yes, Candace.
Oh, I was just going to ask, I know like for associate faculty wouldn't necessarily be appropriate, especially if they were going for that same position. But would there be an option if there's in that discipline, especially if it's niche, that if had retired and then they were doing part-time, or that would be an option being on the committee? I don't
know if the person needs to be on the committee, but we're just thinking about the observation itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna bring back the. Okay. Almost done. We've got about 10 minutes, just over 10 minutes. We're doing great on time. Student evaluation. So during our executive council meeting, the discussion, when I brought up this idea of having a training, several of our members talked about how they find that during committee meetings, we tend to put an overabundance of pressure on student evaluations. In fact, we have the probationer write up an entire report on student evaluations. I mean, that's what their reflection is about, almost completely. And I just wanted to bring that conversation here to you guys to talk about, is that appropriate? Is it relevant? I mean, sometimes this article that's linked in the slides is a pretty good one. There's been a lot of evidence that suggests that, the biggest issue with student evaluations is that we know how they can be used inappropriately. The data can be skewed. If I were a probationer and I was looking at my classrooms and I see one class, I get a score, a median score of, or a mean score of 4.84, and another class of 4.2, and statistically, there's actually no significance there. But because I have to write a whole darn report on this, I'm going to write about how I can improve like this, right? I mean, so you're trying desperately to come up with something to write on, when in reality you are teaching very well and there's truly nothing there. And are there ways that you can solicit feedback from your students beyond this one-time evaluation? The next slide I have actually shows the new questions, if you haven't seen them, that our students are asked. And Heather talked about this yesterday as well, and it'll be gone over next week if you're going to the training next week. These are the new questions that are asked of our students. They are now not questions that are directly asked directly at critiquing the faculty member itself. It's about their experience in the classroom, which I appreciate, but still, it's a one-time, it's asking students a one-time experience, a perception of their experience in class, and how can we make bringing the student voice, student observations into the committee meetings in a more meaningful way. Yeah.
We don't have access to the qualitative or the comments, correct? We're just
Yes, no, that came up yesterday too. So while we were in the training yesterday, Heather chatted with Tiffany, who said that the probationer now is responsible for getting the classroom student evaluations to the committee. But please make it clear to your probationer that when they get their student evaluations, those, open-ended student comments are gonna be attached to that, and that the probationer should feel comfortable not forwarding those if they don't want to. They can request from Bonnie January. Again, Bonnie January is the person the probationer asks to send them a copy without those if they so choose. It's their right to not include the open-ended student comments if they don't want to.
Is that a CBA? Is that a CBA spelled out in the CBA?
It's not in the CBA, but that's been an always understood, and they even mentioned it in the meeting yesterday. Like everybody is clear on that.
But if we're looking to bring more meaning, it's
that
the quantitative does nothing.
I agree.
Evaluation, particularly when I was going through the tenure process, and I always brought the full batch of student comments to my ARCs because that gave the best sense of both my opportunities and challenges, but more importantly, we're kind of reflected the discipline as well. The comments are where the gold is. It's like, well, I do surveys there at the end of every quarter, anonymous survey, so I can get comments. I could care less about the quantitative.
Yeah.
Is there, if we were looking to improve this process going forward, is there a reason not to try to include that as part of the ARC process? I can see why we as a union would not want administrators to have access to that, but
yeah, I think that the reason why we leave it in the probationer's hands is because occasionally those comments can be unproductive and gripes can be laid out there that are truly not about the class, and then they can be personal, like. And so that's why we leave it up to the probationer to say, no, I don't want this to be part of the permanent record the Board of Trustees is gonna see.
Yeah.
And so that's why we leave it up to the probationer. But yes, I mean, I always felt like, sure, let's let them see them. And the probationer can say, you can see all of these. I'm gonna delete this one that just called me a asshat because, or whatever, you know what I mean? So we kind of leave it up to the probationer just to pull out the ones that are completely inappropriate or, so there is validity to allowing the probationer to have some leeway to pull out some of them, but I agree, qualitative data is where I find the most value. Like, I want to see what the students have to say in their own words. I don't care about the Likert scale and where I do to an extent, but it's like.
Well, this also seems to be where the supportive and evaluative are clashing, because again, a conversation about why you're an asshat is
right.
and how to
True
manage
story.
that.
Yeah.
No, and no, I
Good
just
story. No, it's true.
I had one student will just light me up in a comment because I talked about newspapers in a journalism class. They thought that was inappropriate.
Yeah.
Well, how do you deal with that? Having a conversation with my ARC about that was instructive and useful to me.
Nice.
But it seems like that we have skewed too far to the quantitative side. So also, if the probationer has the opportunity to pick and choose which comments, it's like, again, it seems like there are opportunities for both evaluative and supportive work to come out of that qualitative evidence.
Yeah, and I would encourage all committees to talk about this subject straight up, about the value of qualitative data, about sharing the open-ended feedback, and how to take it further, how to bring more meaning to your classroom. Share this journal article that I have with your committee if you want to, the misinformation on student evaluations. It's I think the date on it is 2013 or 14, so it's almost 10 years old, but you can at least use that as a launch pad to find even more recent journal articles as well. For sure, I just want us as a committee to not necessarily just focus on student evaluations, to remember the more holistic picture of the student, of their feedback in other ways, in other valuable ways, and to help encourage our teachers to solicit feedback in other ways.
Can we observe advising sessions? And I'm guessing this would be like counseling where we get student approval,
right?
but is that another area where we could do observations?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, with the entry advisors, that's what they will be doing if you're going to serve on any of those ARCs next quarter. But yes, we can, for sure. That's another way that we can find observations with faculty and students, for sure. especially if they're in their second or third quarter, right? We want to ensure that they are advising students correctly. They want to make sure that they're advising students correctly, you know? Who's on Ruth Schemmel? Dana. Ruth came to me yesterday. Nina, help me. I want to make sure I'm doing this right. So she's like totally gung ho. She's already getting into it because she's got her 10 students. So, which is awesome. So she's doing a great job and doing what she needs to do there. But anyway, just want to bring up the student evaluations to remind us, like, let's have that conversation. Let's take it deeper for them. Yeah. Go ahead.
Nina, I have my hand up. I'm not sure if you saw that, but
I did not.
No, that's okay. No worries. I know it's hard to see when you're sharing the screen. Yeah. So I know I did this years ago when I was on my ARC, and it was suggested, but you can get feedback. I mean, because when you get the student feedback, that's at the end, but especially if you're doing an activity, especially if you're connecting it to real life and all that, is to do a plus delta and ask the students, this is what I was hoping to get out of this assignment. So what did I do well? And then what suggestions do you have for improvement? And you can really use that constructive feedback. So I'd encourage probationers to do that, because you're getting that student feedback at the end. And I agree, you don't get really that qualitative, but they can certainly get, we do it in nursing for, you know, our simulations and stuff. We're using the plus delta. We do that so many times during the quarter, but it really is, we use that feedback to improve each quarter. So you're getting that kind of real-time feedback, especially with new assignments they're trying out, especially with ones that you're really connecting it to real life application. So yeah, I would encourage them to do that, even do that once a quarter if they want, and they can use that as part of their reflection. It's not all on the student evaluation, and that's actually at the end. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, there is, not only not just relying on formative assessment like these student evaluations, but there's other types of assessments. There's a book called Classroom Assessment Techniques that if you Google it or look it up on Amazon, there's a brand new version coming out in June this coming year. The edition that's out right now is old. It's really old, like 20 years old. But there's a new version coming out for university professors, Classroom Assessment Techniques, it's called, coming out in June. And it's a great, the original book that I have it in my office. It's great because it has these one page, super quick, can take a few minutes of your class time for all different subjects, all different topics. So no matter what kind of topic you're teaching, it'll have it in there that you can tweak and make for your students. If you, for your own class or for your probationer, recommend that book. It's a great spot to get student feedback, student information, and then bring it to your committee meetings and have a conversation. Hey, I tried this out with my students. This is what they brought to the table. This is what the feedback they gave to me. And that's a much richer conversation with the students. So
what was the book called, Nina?
It's called Classroom Assessment Techniques. I believe one of the authors' names is Cross, C-R-O-S-S.
Cross and Angelo.
Angelo is the other one, yeah, or is it D'Angelo? Is it Angelo? Just Angelo. Angelo. Yeah, the new book's coming out, I think, in June of this coming year. Yeah, I'm gonna reserve it and get it because I love that. We call it the cats when I got my master's in adult education, but
the second,
it's a really good.
Was saying about the plus delta.
Yeah, plus delta is one of those techniques.
Yeah,
in that book.
and Peg pushed that in the new hire academy I was part of, and what it really does is it allows you to engage with your students so you're not getting blindsided by the student evaluations at the end of the quarter. When it's quantitative and going on the record, you know, if there's a problem, I still use it every quarter in all my classes in week 4 because it allows me, if you're taking the formative assessment. Yeah. I meant, yes. So these will give you that formative assessment instead of just the summative assessment at the end. Yeah. So, well, thank you guys. I want to abide by our time. We are 1 minute over. This has been a fantastic training. I'm so glad you all came. Hopefully it was meaningful to you guys. Thanks, Nina. Thank you.
Yeah. And any other feedback or comments that you have for me, you can email me later. I did record this, and so I'm hoping to make it available to the rest of our faculty who weren't able to attend.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Nina.
Yay.
Thank you, Nina.
You.
Welcome, guys.